A lot of Wi-Fi codes, train tickets, gasoline receipts, a lot of travel. Weather changing, doing laundry once a week, lots of shows, sweaty shows, good shows, bad shows, and sleeping in a variety of different places all the time. But fun, incredibly fun.
Was
Really great people, hospitality, interesting cities, especially in the old world of Europe. I mean, when you realize that there was absolutely no plan for things like cars and big motorways. It's really cool. It's like these cities were kind of built by people just for people walking around and being in them. So, and they're all different, the architecture and everything. And so, the variety never seems to get old. You know, it's anything but that. I mean, it's just constant. So, yeah, I think just a non-stop sort of, you know, it's like someone just pummeling you with interesting things all the time. I think subconsciously a little bit. I mean, I try not to write as like I try not to write like a journal about things. I don't try not to write them in the literal sense. I try to focus more on the emotional aspects about, how I'm feeling about things or how my views change or my, and that's based around the surroundings and the sort of different situations that you're in. I mean, if you think about like being on the move for 9 months a year, it's kind of an abnormal thing these days. I mean, people used to do that when they were trying to find food and shelter, but we've solved those problems for the most part, at least in the Western world. So now you're kind of doing it by choice. But absolutely, like all the surroundings and the situations, they seep down, and eventually, when you're writing songs, you recall things, and it's like a really cool thing to have those moments when you're writing. I don't know that I'm really sort of in favor or sort of dismissive of that word. I mean, I do think of a troubadour in the sense of kind of like the older version of someone going town to town without a plan, without any kind of ideas about what they're sort of doing. They're just kind of going and singing for their supper. And I mean, there's absolutely aspects of what I do that's like that, but I don't know if I guess that it's not really a term that I kind of like have any emotional attachment to, or loathe or something like that. So for the sake of an easy answer, sure. I think what's interesting about, just to go back to the album that I put out before that, the album I put out before that was a sort of version of myself that was becoming a little bit frustrated in sort of what is modern day career, what is modern day, what's necessary to be sort of like content, but also to kind of be moving in some creative direction. And so I wrote an album that I felt was kind of a bit raw, a bit angry about, but how I felt at that moment. And then I went and did all the things that I said that I wanted to be doing, and then sort of reflected on them with the new album. Essentially, yeah, I mean, I can only look at 2 years of playing like 500 or 600 different concerts, well, more like 450 to 500 concerts, and thinking about what it's like to actually do that, tapping into sort of the emotional sides of it, because it's a very different experience than if you're working in an office 9 to 5. I mean, you have your own ups and downs in that world, and then in this world, you have a completely new set of things you didn't even imagine were possible, like incredible ones, and also sometimes like you go in some dark places with it too, and that's kind of what I just took from and put all into this new album. When you're playing these songs for me live, or any type of songs live, you have a different relationship with what you're doing. I mean, there's an audience, you feed off of that audience, how they're responding to them. And when you're actually making an album in a studio and you're writing a song and you're trying to understand what the point of the song is, I find from my experience that the point that I want to make often only needs to be 2.5 minutes or 3 minutes sometimes. Some of them are a little longer, and I guess maybe I just grew up on songs that were short as well. And like, you know, when I think about sort of those early Beatles songs or even those early Elvis Presley songs, I mean, they were rarely over like 3 minutes or something like that. So, I mean, maybe deep down I'm a pop songwriter, you know, and I'm not ashamed to say it. So I guess that's what I think about them. But I've heard, I mean, just to kind of counter that with something else, I mean, there's some punk rock records that I own that songs are like 50 seconds long. So, I mean, to me, I feel like some of the songs are like, oh, it's the right length, you know. That was totally kind of by accident in a way too, and I mean that like so. I guess to explain, I mean, the first song on the album is called New Year's Eve, and then the last song, which is actually only technically available in Europe, it's called New Year's Day. And the real album, well, not the real album, but the full album everywhere else doesn't have those last two songs on it, so it only actually makes sense in Europe. But I guess to explain the concept of the song New Year's Eve, I mean, it was sort of this one about starting over. This idea that New Year's Eve is this kind of great reason to sort of push the reset button on the year that one had. And you could interpret that in this really beautiful way. I mean, the events that typically happen on New Year's Eve are just terrible. And no one should go out on New Year's Eve and spend lots of money because you're just buying into a lie. But there is something very, very cool about this concept of like starting again. And I think for a lot of my friends and people that I know, I mean, almost there's a certain selection of them every year that feel like, oh, 2015 was the worst, 2014 was the worst. So this kind of moment of being able to kind of like start something new is where I really focused on with that song. And New Year's Day, which actually I think is kind of one of the most like darker songs on the record as far as lyrically, I think it's that kind of the most sobering song. It's like, no matter how much you kind of want to try to make these attempts, you're always going to have to deal with this darker, uglier side of your life. And to be as open and honest about that, I think, is the theme of that song.